Recording in progress.
Great. So welcome everyone. I'm Hannah from the Bangor Public Library, and I just wanted to kick us off with a quick hello and thanks for joining us. This is the latest in a series of programs that is co-sponsored between the library and SCORE, which is a great organization that helps entrepreneurs. And we're very excited to have Allie here today to talk about market research. I'm going to hand things over to Mary Beth to share a little bit more about SCORE's work and then give Allison a proper introduction. But if you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat. We will be sending out the recording of this call as well as Allison's presentation slides after today. So you'll have access to all that information later. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar, Understanding Your Customer Through Market Research. I'm Mary Beth McLaughlin. I'm with SCORE Maine. Our mission at SCORE is to help small businesses succeed through mentoring and education. And so we are so happy to be joining partnership with the Bangor Public Library to get this webinar out today. Today's program is presented by Alison Lane of CEI and the SBDC, Maine Small Business Development Center. She's been a certified business advisor since 2019, and she comes to us today with over 10 years of experience working with small businesses in the Greater Bangor area. So welcome, Alison, and thank you for being with us today to share your experience and your enthusiasm with us.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thanks, Hannah. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hannah said it is always nice when it's kind of a gloomy day to sit behind the Zoom screen and learn a few things. So hopefully this will be interesting. Give me just 10 seconds here to get the right screen shared, get myself situated. And please holler if at any point in time my internet starts to cut, if you can't hear me, my audio is questionable. You know, technology, it has a mind of its own. I have pretty good internet where I am, but please don't hesitate to throw something in the comment into the chat or just pop off mute for a minute to let me know if you're dealing with any technical difficulties that you think are my fault. So as Mary Beth said, this is Understanding Your Customer Through Market Research. Going to talk a little bit about what I consider to be one of the starting points of marketing. And whether you're new to business or have been in business for a while, market research is definitely something to pay attention to, something to learn about, something that often gets sort of backburnered, especially as you're running your business for a while. But if you're looking to increase demand or just better satisfy the customers you have, paying attention to market research is pivotal. So first, I'm Allie Lane. As Mary Beth said, I'm a business advisor with the Maine Small Business Development Center. I work out of our Bangor office, although since COVID, with technology being what it is, we work, I could really statewide, any for-profit business within the state of Maine. Although I do have 13 certified advisor colleagues working full-time statewide advising clients. So if you come to me from another part of the state that isn't in Penobscot or Piscataquis counties where I tend to focus, I'll point you to one of my colleagues who can help as well. And just briefly, because there's so many acronyms in this small business world. So the SBDC is the Small Business Development Center. We offer no-cost confidential business advising on a full-time basis and help with things like business planning, strategy, growth, if you're buying or selling your business, trying to get a loan, trying to find grants, looking for capital in any sort of way, financial projections, everybody's favorite numbers topic, my personal favorite, marketing, HR operations, and much more. All of the general business topics that apply to for-profit businesses around the state of Maine. And if you would like to find an advisor, on our website, mainesbdc.org, there's this button called Request Advising. That gets you there. Couple things just before we get started. And I think Hannah covered this, so I didn't need this slide in here, but being recorded. Keep yourself on mute if you don't mind, unless, like I said, if you have some there are technical challenges that you think are on my end, please feel free to holler. If you do have questions, pop them in the chat. I expect to have some time at the end to get to them. But in case we don't, it's good to have those questions compiled because I can answer them and email you answers later, or we can connect and chat one-on-one to answer your questions too. Also, feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat. I'm not offended if you're having a sidebar in the chat. Sometimes someone will ask a question and another attendee will chime in with an answer. And I don't know everything. And certainly if you're in certain industries that I'm not super familiar with, it can be really helpful to have your fellow business owners or aspiring entrepreneurs chime in too. So please don't hesitate to chat amongst yourselves in the chat. So to start on the topic at hand, I always like to start with the why are you here question. You obviously recognize market research as a business topic that you'd like to learn about, but I find that sometimes it's not enough. It's like, well, why is it important? Why should I even, be paying attention? So I like to explain the importance of market research by telling you about my day. So I got up and I sat and ate breakfast and I scrolled on my phone like any typical American does. I scrolled Facebook on my phone, right? I saw some ads for hotels. And then I took a walk and a truck with the Spectrum logo on the side drove by me. Got in the car to go to work and I heard on the radio an ad for a country concert at the Bangor waterfront coming up this summer. And then I sat down at my desk and I opened up the YouTube music browser window that I always play in the background. And I immediately got an ad for QuickBooks Online. So I was just exposed, those moments were the things that I remember, the marketing efforts that I remember absorbing just this morning. And that was just a tiny, tiny fraction of what I was exposed to. So what was it? Why am I sitting here telling you about those ads specifically when I probably absorbed, when I was scrolling Facebook and listening to the radio, there were probably 100 more ads on each channel alone being thrown at me, but I don't remember any of them. So I remember those ads because, well, I work with small businesses every day and I help them a lot with QuickBooks. I like country music. Spectrum recently ran a line down my road. I live on a dirt road and we haven't had their service for a while, or we've never had their service until recently. And just recently I booked a flight and a hotel for a trip I have coming up. So those marketing efforts that I heard and just told you about from this morning were memorable to me because they were relevant to me and they were put in front of me at an opportune moment when I was on my way to work, sort of paying attention of course, to the road or to my breakfast or whatever, but also had a little bit of brain space to absorb that marketing. Now, if there were ads for apartment rentals or cat litter or aftershave or things that aren't relevant to my life, I probably wouldn't have even remembered to tell you that they were there. So every day, all the time, whether you're watching TV or you're working at your computer or you're on your phone, you're just blasted with marketing. The internet just is an incredibly overwhelming place, and we're just constantly blasted with marketing all day. So it's important that the people that are paying money or even just putting their time into marketing, that's you, the business owners, know how to get in front of the right people at the right time with the right message, or you could very easily be overlooked just because people won't notice you. So we're going to start to talk about how to do that. And then the conversation beyond market research really continues into marketing in general, which a lot of people think of as advertising, but it's so much more than that. But market research is truly step one of marketing. So it all starts with figuring out who these people are. How do you know who you're talking to if you don't know who they are or anything about them? So this is your target market. You'll hear this term. I'll probably come back to it. It's your most likely, most loyal customers, AKA the low-hanging fruit. So I owned a coffee shop before I started business advising, and this is my people that lived or worked within a mile of my shop and would come in 5 or 6 days a week for coffee and would just sing my praises and would talk about how great my business was and would spend a decent amount of money with me. They were the easiest to please. They were my biggest champions. That was my target market. And I sold coffee and baked goods, so you may be inclined to think, oh, okay, well, her target market could be just about anybody. And I would argue with that. That's definitely something that I hear a lot from clients who want to make sure they've casted a wide net and are appealing to as many people as possible, especially if they're selling coffee and baked goods. But it's not everybody. Because when you do try to please everyone, you make compromises. And when you make compromises, you please no one. I knew what my customers liked for coffee. I knew what they were willing to pay. I knew which baked goods were their favorites. I knew where they were located. Just from chatting with them, I would know if they lived or worked nearby, what kind of timeline they were on, if they needed me to move quickly, or if they wanted me to chit chat. So I knew enough about these people and started to kind of plot them. We'll talk about what it's important to know about this in a minute here, but also depending on your product service, depending on your budget, you might also have multiple target markets. So for me, I had sort of my 7 to 8 a.m. people that would always come in that sort of fit one demographic. You know, they were on their way to work. They were maybe mostly middle-aged. They had slightly above average disposable income. They valued quality coffee as opposed to just something to get some caffeine in them. But I had a different target market that I focused on later in the day. So you might have multiple target markets, and that's okay. Just know to define those people and don't just try to appeal to everyone. So I'm gonna look at an example to help you sort of see it from the customer's perspective. You might not even quite realize this is happening when it does, but to prove why knowing about your target market is important. So say you were in a car accident. Sorry, I know this isn't a very pleasant example, but it'll make sense. So everybody's okay, but you're a little riled up, trying to figure out who you call and what order, figuring out what to do with the insurance company. Oh, I'm going to need a rental car. And oh no, I've missed half a day at work. I better call my boss and give him a heads up and cancel this meeting. And so your brain is very busy, even more so than my brain was this morning when I was absorbing marketing material, eating breakfast and driving to work. And now to top it off, you're experiencing a little bit of neck pain, maybe a little bit of whiplash. And you think, once things have kind of settled down, you're like, yeah, I should probably look into some physical therapy for this, because everyone who's had neck or back pain knows that it's the gift that just keeps on giving. Now let's just pretend for a minute that you don't need a referral and you're looking for direct access to PT. So just go with me on that. Consider in this next slide, which of these companies you are most likely to call for physical therapy after this car accident. Whoops, there we go. So just think about it for a minute. You don't have to, this is a hypothetical, but think about it. And I would argue that you are most likely to call C, because this visual shows someone who presumably has some sort of neck pain. And you instantly relate to it in some way. And I'm not saying, there's 1,000 other reasons you might make a choice of A or B, but just in general, from looking at the picture alone, I think it's fairly safe to say you might resonate with the issue that's addressing neck pain, right? Now, let's say you were a college athlete rehabbing a knee injury, and these pictures were on 3 different physical therapy websites. I would argue that image B is going to be the one that resonates with you. It's a young man. He looks like he's in shape. He's doing something that looks like it might be a knee, it's involving the knees. So you relate to him. And then, if you're let's say you're a senior citizen recovering from surgery, you might relate to image A, where there is someone who's more senior pictured in the ad. So images alone can target a particular audience, and knowing which of these demographics and needs are applying best to your product or service allows you to tailor your images and your other marketing content to appeal to those people. And there's other things too. In images, which we won't dig into too deep today, but the background, the environment, the gender of the provider, there's many things in images that can trigger biases in you that you don't even realize are happening. And the reason that you pick certain companies over others are sometimes so subtle, you almost couldn't even explain what led you to choose them. So paying attention to sort of the cognitive biases that are leading your customers to make decisions is important. And the first step in doing that is knowing as much as you can about your, jumped ahead, about your customers, about your market. So what should you know about them? We've started to hint on this a little bit, but demographics is a good start. I like to ask people, you know, of your customer base. And again, maybe you have two different customer bases. If you have two distinct sort of categories of services or products, like that's fine. But when you're trying to identify each target market, ask yourself, you know, is it predominantly male or female? What age category do they fit in? Geographically, you know, where do they live or work? Thinking about some of their behaviors, you know, do they shop online? Are they comfortable with technology? What are their sort of either daily or regular habits? Things like money spending, you know, where do they spend their money? How comfortable are they spending money? Are they cheap, or are they pretty willing to throw money at whatever it is that you're selling or servicing? So being able to kind of hone in on these things, and it's not always obvious. I mean, for example, with my cafe and bakery, if you'd asked me, is my market predominantly male or female, I probably would have said no. We really are pretty evenly split. But I definitely would have been able to give you some insight into age, definitely behaviors and habits as it comes to buying their coffee in the morning. I could have told you exactly what time this person's showing up and how much of a hurry they're in and what kind of small talk they're going to make with me while I'm pouring their coffee, you know. Really fun. And you start to see a lot of commonalities among your clients. But most importantly, what to know about target market is what is important to them, especially as it relates to your product or service. What do they value? And if you know who your target market is and know what's important to them, that's more than half the battle of marketing. You could sell ice to an Eskimo if you knew what was important to the Eskimo. And if you could somehow figure out how ice is important to the Eskimo. So those are some things that are really important to know about your target market. So let's shift a little bit here, because the whole point of market research is to learn who your target market is and about them, like the previous slide just explained. But market research is also about looking at that group of people and figuring out, are there enough people that want what you're selling? And are there not enough other options already on the market? You know, is the market already saturated? So when I opened up my coffee shop, I made sure to choose a location that wasn't already being satisfied by 3 other coffee businesses that were doing something very similar to me. And also, research is confirming that what you're assuming to be true about your market is true. You can't just, it's not an if you build it, they will come situation typically when you're starting or running your business. It's how do I make sure that what I'm selling is actually what they want? And you yourself might not even be part of your target market. And even if you are, you might be wrong. You might think you have the greatest thing since sliced bread. But as you start doing research and talking to your market, you come to find out, oh, they'd like it a lot better if I did this, this, and this. For example, one question I had when I was opening my coffee shop was, should I sell espresso? And I had a lot of people telling me in the beginning, you have to sell espresso, you're a coffee shop. And I liked espresso. So I was like, maybe I do. Financially, I opted not to because the additional equipment and the space in my shop wasn't ideal for it. And as I got open, I continued to do market research, mostly through observation, which we're going to talk about methods in a minute here. But if I worked my front counter every day, or if I talked to the staff who were running the front counter, how many times a day was I asked about espresso? And after about a year in business, I found that the answer was rare, except during the summer when I was getting tourists from out of state. And then I had a lot of questions about espresso. So I was able to deduce from observation. And if I was smart, I would have actually tracked it, had the tally marks beside the register, how many times it was mentioned. But it was so infrequent that I knew from observation that it was not something my market was demanding. And then the third objective of market research, although these are not in any particular order, but how to best satisfy that market. So not only do you have to attract them, but you also have to retain them. And for your target market, I argue that the best way to retain them is to spoil them. Treat them really well, treat them like gold, and give them exactly what they want. You can see how that would be problematic if your target market was everyone, because you can't spoil everyone. You can't satisfy everyone. It's a hard lesson you learn in business as people start to complain about different things. So market research is really about, what if you knew what your customers were thinking? If you had a crystal ball and can read their mind. And market research is the closest you're going to get to that crystal ball. So what can market research do for you? And I promise in a minute here, we're going to get to the how, because I know when I watch webinars like this, I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's important, but how do I do it? We're getting there. So basically, you start with checking feasibility, making sure, again, like we said on the previous slide, that there are enough people that are going to buy, they're going to pay money for what you're selling. Market research can also help you save money. It's going to help you buy the right inventory. It's going to help you advertise in the right places at the right times. So you end up, by knowing about your market and knowing what they're doing, you pay a lot less money to reach people at a much deeper, better level. Market research can also offer insight into pricing, understanding how comfortable your customers are spending money in your sector. Some are super price sensitive, others are a lot less so. But market research is also a great opportunity to connect with your customers. So it's kind of a lead into that next step, which will be the next step in marketing. First understand who you're talking to, and then, well, start talking to them. But market research alone, you can use it as a marketing tool. If you're conducting a survey, you can put a little blurb at the beginning of the survey that says why you're conducting it, an introduction to who you are and what your business is. Give them a little bit of a sneak peek. And again, I keep coming back to my coffee shop, but that was my most recent experience with business ownership. So I did a survey maybe 4 or 5 months before I opened, and it kind of gave people a preview of, hey, this is happening, this is coming. I gave them the sort of region. I can't remember if I had the exact location. I think I did at that time. So I was able to tell them the address. So it was a little sneak peek, and good sort of taste to get them to whet their appetite. And last, market research will also help with those sometimes dreaded, although I love financial projections. If you are going to the bank to get a loan, writing your business plan, and you're trying to make estimates to figure out, can I pay my bills, essentially? Market research can help guide you towards estimating sales. So it becomes a little bit less of a guessing game. So let's shift into the how. And real quick before we do that, I just want to look at the chat, make sure there's nothing, I don't want to go too far here. So one person asked, what tools or resources would you recommend to hone in on the demographics? Good question. I think I'm going to wait and address that later. I believe this next section, as we're talking about how to do market research, it's how to do market research in general, but it can also help understanding the who. So I'm gonna maybe circle back to that question, although I think it's going to get kind of answered. And are there differences in marketing of consumables versus durables? Okay, so yeah, so something that's going to expire, like coffee and baked goods, versus something that's going to last forever. Long story short, I would say, definitely there's differences in marketing every product or service, but I would say not. You want to be careful treating durables as too durable, because it still costs you to be holding on to inventory. It costs you in storage, things are getting outdated. You can only market so many things at a time, and if you've got products that have been sitting on the shelves for too long and they're getting outdated, your marketing is probably shifted forward and is now marketing your more newer items. So think about durables a little bit as consumable themselves. Now, it's not as vital that you sell them the next day, like my baked goods, but you don't want to get too lax with it either. So you do kind of have to have that sense of urgency that's still there. And I won't go too far. I love talking about marketing, so don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole today. But I would say, yeah, every marketing is different for everyone, although the first step is always that understanding that target market, and also understanding your product or service and what they call it the value proposition. You know, what is so special about it that it's better than the competition or better than the alternatives. And then it gets into the nitty-gritty of which channels do I want to be on, and what's the message and all of that, which would be topics for a whole nother day. And I guess while I'm here, though, I'll give a little ploy. Maine SBDC has a YouTube channel with a lot of recorded webinars from the past that have gone over a lot of these topics. So just last month, I did a webinar, Understanding Social Media Marketing for Beginners. So if you're interested in learning about more marketing, check out our YouTube channel. But shameless plug aside, let's talk about the how. So we know it's impactful. We know what it can do for us, sort of what the goal of market research is, but how do we do it? Well, the first, oops, if I can make the slide change, there we go. The first method, and I think the one that people start with because it's easier, would be secondary market research. And this is where someone else has collected the information and you're absorbing it and analyzing it. A lot of it's going to be the internet, you know. Maybe it's industry data or state data. You're getting it through Google searches. Maybe it's magazines and journals, different databases. Some big companies hire market research firms to get them a ton of information. And this is a little bit to the question in the chat. Sometimes you can get secondary market research that tells you what kinds of people are buying your product or service specifically. Like the market is primarily women in their 20s, and here are some of their habits. So there is some secondary market research about that. There is a downside to trusting that, and there's a downside to secondary market research, which I'll get to in a second. We also, at the SBDC, we have access to some market research tools, so we can pull some reports from a couple of different sources. Now, all this aside, this method is it's a great starting point, but it should be taken with a grain of salt. The US, so if I capture just 1% of the market share, I'll be good. And that's not good enough. For one, depending on what you're selling and who you're selling it to, a lot of times the data is not going to match your market. So if you're getting countrywide data, and your market is in Maine, we all know that Maine is not reflective of how the rest of the country behaves. I mean, people in California, in LA, are doing things a little different than people in Aroostook County, Maine. And a general rule of thumb, which is actually an advantage if your primary sort of target market is in Maine, Maine does tend to be a little behind the curve. So sometimes we can watch what others across the country are doing in your industry and realize that, okay, Maine's going to get there, but we're not there yet. But this is a great opportunity as a business to be sort of a first mover in the state. But the downside is that it makes it really difficult to trust market research, and it doesn't tend to be very specific. So is it really helpful to know that the market across the country is a $3 billion market? Like, I mean, no, not really, because that doesn't tell you how many people are going to walk through your door or push order on your website. So start with secondary market research, and then how to do better, conduct some primary market research. And this is the harder, more cumbersome part. And if you're already in business, a great way to do this is just with your existing customers. People are willing to share their opinion. I mean, we know that, especially online. Asking your customers for reviews, doing a survey, doing anonymous surveys, chatting with them whenever you get the opportunity, interviewing, even if you have a chance, can hey, can I have a 10-minute phone call with you to talk through the experience you had when you used our services? So don't be afraid to ask. It's amazing how willing people are to share. You know, interviews, focus groups, surveys, we've talked about all of these things. Observation, again, if you're already in your business, or if you have the chance to engage with competitors or other people doing things similarly, stalking their social media, checking out their website. One of my favorite things to do in business was reading the reviews of my competitors and trying to find common lines of complaints. You know, what are the things that people are complaining about most often? It's always fun to read bad reviews. So it was partly entertainment. I'd go down that rabbit hole, but there was a lot of education in there to see what was important to people. Traffic counts. I say this primarily because if you're starting your business and looking at locations and trying to figure out how to do financial projections to estimate sales, understanding, you know, how much traffic is going to go by your business if you're on a main drag, if you're a retail restaurant, something like that. And again, just talking to other resources. So maybe it's your customers, maybe it's your neighbors, maybe it's other people that are serving your market. So if I were looking to do market research about the Small Business Development Center, about my business advising clients, I could talk to the business reference department. I could talk to Hannah at the library, you know, to get a feel for, oh, okay, well, what are people coming in to get help with? I could talk to Mary Beth at SCORE and say, you mentor folks who are starting and running businesses. Like, what's the need there? What are people struggling with? So really talking to others. And I don't, you know, obviously if you have a direct competitor, being kosher about how you're approaching that. But you might be surprised who you can talk to. You know, when I opened my coffee shop, I talked to a restaurant that was located a couple miles down the road that mostly did lunch and dinner. I was breakfast and lunch. So did we have some customers overlap? Were we competing for that lunch traffic? Yeah. But we also had totally different angles. They were sit down, I was takeout. I think our calendars, we only overlapped like 2 hours a day. And so, you know, you don't have to talk to your direct customers to get some information. I'm sorry, your direct competitors to get information, but follow up your secondary market research with primary, where you're actually talking to people, you got boots on the ground, talking to people who are within your market. And this can also be, I know I spent a lot of time talking about physical, like restaurants, retail, like you're actually having people walk through your door. But if you're an online business, this can totally be done too. Looking at forums, engaging with people on social media, again, collecting reviews, scheduling quick phone calls with people who are in your target market. So it can totally be done. It doesn't have to be literal boots on the ground. Some general rules of thumb about how to do market research. Seems obvious, but it's amazing how easy it is to stray. Be objective. Go in with an open mind. You know, don't make assumptions and then go into the research trying to prove those assumptions. Listen, again, it sounds obvious, but it's amazing how you get excited about what you're doing and all of a sudden you're talking to someone and you remember the part of the webinar earlier where I said it's also kind of marketing because you're planting the seed about your business. But remember, your primary objective is to listen and learn, not to push your product or service or business on them. So listen first. If you get an opportunity to make a plug or if they ask you a question, great. But ask them a question, listen. And I've tried as an advisor to get better at it as well. Like when you ask a question, they answer, but they don't give you a full answer. You can try to keep your mouth shut for an extra 5 seconds. Then it gets their gears turning. It makes them uncomfortable with the silence and they give you more and more information. So there's a whole art and science behind learning from people. And also cast a wide net. So again, don't come into this assuming that, oh, my market is female. Again, maybe your secondary market research allowed you to narrow down a little bit. So you don't have to spend a ton talking to everybody and everybody, but don't narrow it down based on any assumptions. Some best practices in general. as we've talked about, balancing the secondary and the primary market research, also balancing the data you get. If you get secondary market research data, you can get some local, you can get some state-based, some county-based. It's always going to be easier to get the national stuff, but if you can try to look to local sources, great. Note biases that you have coming into your research. Credibility of sources is huge. Whenever people give me a business plan and it has information from secondary market research, the sources aren't cited, I'm instantly saying this, it means nothing. And if the sources are cited, but they're not good sources, if it's a Wikipedia kind of thing, you lose credibility with that data as well. And then with primary market research, obviously being respectful of privacy and keeping it legal and on the up and up as you're talking to people. If you get information from people, not sharing their name or information anywhere unless you have their permission. Simple things like that, but got to be said. And then don't do as I say, not as I did. I used the example about selling espresso in my coffee shop, and I told you I observed. And my hunch was that only tourists ask for espresso. Well, if I'd have been on it, I'd have tracked my results. I'd have been able to tell you exactly how many people were asking for espresso. I'd have been able to give you a little bit more information, like how did I know they were tourists? Did I just assume that they were, or did they tell me that when they walked up to the counter? So track your results, because then it's going to help eliminate those biases that you're putting in. Gives you something to analyze and look back at when it's some time has passed and you've been in business a couple of years and you're like, well, I thought I knew this about my market, but is that still true, or do I need to go back and recollect data? Keep an eye out for SKUs. If you're trying to run the feasibility of a product or service you're going to add to your business and you're only asking your family and friends, and you're telling them, just be honest with me, be harsh, but you're asking them point blank to their face across the dinner table from them, note you're probably going to get positively skewed data. I'll never forget when I was going to open my coffee shop, I had a friend from high school comment on one of my early posts before I'd opened that said, "This is amazing. I'm so excited to come try you. I live right down the road. I'll be there every day." And I ran the shop for 3 years before I sold it and never saw her face in my shop. So people are going to hype you up and you're going to take that with a grain of salt. And then adapt to your findings. So again, don't be sort of stubborn with that original idea. You got to be willing to do what your customers want, and within reason, you might be passionate about something and you might be adamant that that's going to be part of your service or product offerings. But if you're finding people don't want that, that's why we're doing market research, to make sure that you're not wasting your time fighting an uphill battle, selling the ice to the Eskimos. So just to sort of wrap up here, if you didn't already grasp it, the better you know your customer, the better your business can perform. Get out and talk to people. Don't assume, and approach them objectively. And keep track of your results, which you're going to look at with an unbiased eye and hopefully respond to. Those are sort of the 4 key takeaways about market research. And you'll get these slides after, so just contact information to our website and phone number and the button to request advising. And let me take a look at the chat. Feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. We do have a little bit of time, so I'll hang out on the call. And one last slide that just gives you the links to our social media here. But let's see.
And somebody asked for that YouTube channel earlier, so I put that in the chat as well. There's a link to it there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and I'll stop sharing. So always kind of nice to change the scenery. So what platforms do you find are the best to conduct market research? Oh, I assume you're talking about secondary market research when you say platforms. Honestly, as far as websites go, it's kind of all across the board. I tend to Google and then vet the sources that pop up, because based on your industry, you're going to see different market research tools. At the SBDC, we use one called Vertical IQ. I think that's it's a paid resource that we can run it for you if you would like us to do that. And that's a good objective one. They've just recently added some local data information. So now it's not all just the national stuff. So I use that. I am drawing a blank. There's another tool. Let me see if
I'll put in a quick plug for a library resource that we have available. So if you've got a Bangor Public Library card, we have a database called Data Axle, which is super helpful for market research, particularly on the side of like finding out what competitors or similar businesses already exist in an area. So it's got a nice advanced search you can use to pull up like, yeah, how, what are other places that are selling coffee in this county or this town or whatever you're looking for. And that's free to use for anybody who has a Bangor Public Library card. And anyone who lives in the state of Maine can get a Bangor Public Library card for free.
Thank you, Anna. That's great. Yeah. I remember in college using IBIS World, and I don't use that anymore because it's a paid resource that I don't have access to. But I would also argue like the university system and probably the Fogler Library. I think there's some. I know I've sent clients there for help searching for trademarks and patents and stuff like that. So I know they've got.
Yeah, they have a great patent center there that will help anybody in the community.
Yeah, so library seems like an obvious market research tool, but I feel like nowadays we spend so much time on the internet. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I can walk in there and talk to a real human being and get help. So it varies. If you have an online shop, is it important to know where the target market is located? That's a great question. I would say yes. I would say that's part of knowing who they are. So that way, on your website, how can you change the messaging? If you're going to pay for an ad, say you're going to pay for a Google ad or a social media ad, you can, if okay, well, most of my market is in New England, you can have that ad be shown to primarily people in New England. And depending on what ads you're using, if you're paying per click, you want to make sure that those clicks are as valuable as possible. So I definitely think with an online shop, it can be helpful to know. And usually most online, like Shopify and Square and all of that, you can see where people are buying from. And look for trends. You might find with your business that you're all over the place. You might find I've sold to 50 customers this year and it was one in every state. Like it might be, and then okay, well, I guess the answer to that question then is no, it's not that important for me to know since they're everywhere. But it's good to track it at first to see if there are any trends. And especially if you're selling different products online, it can be really interesting to see, okay, this product sells really well in the Midwest. This product sells really well in New England. This product sells really well when the weather is warm in whatever geography I'm looking at, because it can tell you about your products or services. And when you start talking about them, like, okay, it's important to people to buy this when the weather is warm, or something about the Midwest makes people like this product. What is it? It can be really fascinating too. So great question.
I think that's caught up with what's in the chat. If folks have other questions, we're a fairly small group. So if anyone's more comfortable speaking your question and not having to type it, you're welcome to unmute and shout it out, or we'll keep looking at the chat, see if anyone else has anything else they want to pick Alison's brain about.
And if anything, I know I talk kind of fast and throw a lot at you. So if you kind of get looking back at the slides after or play parts of the recording again and other questions come up, all of us, Hannah, Mary Beth, and myself are all very accessible. You're not going to have to pay for our time. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us to dig in a little bit more once you've had a chance to digest everything I just kind of spit at you. I see
Drew, I see you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask your question? We're not hearing you yet, Drew. I don't know if you're having audio issues. I see you've unmuted, but we're still not hearing you. If you want to work on that, or you're welcome to type it into the chat. I'm going to ask a question that just got sent to me in the chat while we kind of wait for Drew to hopefully get his audio working. Um, Gabe asks, where do you think money is best well spent for marketing? There's a loaded question for you, Allison.
Yeah, really. I know. I hate that my answer to all these questions is it depends, but it does. I do say with money is that it doesn't, I don't start with money when it comes to marketing, because I have people that come to me and they say, my budget is $500 a month. What do I do with it? And I can never answer that question until we've dug into, well, who's your target market? Where is your target market hanging out? You know, like which social media channels are they on? Are they finding you through Google search, or are they finding you because their friends are talking about you? The best thing you can do, I know this is a little bit of not answering to that question, I'll come back to it, but the best thing you can do is when you are in business and you get a customer, ask them how they heard about you, and dig a little. If they say, oh, Google search. Oh, okay. Well, do you mind me asking, like, what did you search? Like, do you remember? And I mean, you don't want to pry and be obnoxious, and depending on what your business is, but ask them how they heard about you and track that, make a note of that. But yeah, as far as where to spend your money, it's totally going to depend. And you might find that the best marketing is not even paid marketing. Some industries, some businesses that really rely on having deeper relationships and connections with their clients are going to do better constant interaction with these people, you know, with their email chains or their social media, or they're at networking events, meeting people and talking to people and building those relationships. Sometimes that doesn't cost you anything but time. I think your time budget is almost even more important than your money budget sometimes. But otherwise, you're depending on what your market is and where they're hanging out. Sometimes it makes sense to spend money on digital, you know, optimizing your search engine optimization, you know, being found on Google when people type in XYZ near me. Sometimes you're going to find more traditional means of advertising, you know, your radio, your print, local sponsorship, stuff like that. Sometimes it's going to be the best use of your money, but it always starts, it doesn't, for me at least, doesn't start with the budget. It starts with the who and where are they? And then spend your time and money there.
So Drew clarified that the question they had was about the federal 8A business development program. I'm not sure if you want to be any more specific, Drew, or Allison, if you have any general thoughts about that you want to jump in with.
I guess I would need to know in what context. What right. About 8A? 8A tends to have it sort of is a behind the scenes thing that typically the business owner doesn't even know. I guess I'm wondering if that question, you know, is it related to lending? Yes.
Did my mic work?
Yeah, we're hearing you now.
Awesome. So I was on your website and I was looking to just apply for assistance. But there's a question on there that says, are you 8A certified? I got looking at it quickly and there's a lot to dive into there.
Gotcha. I would say just don't select it. Yeah, it's an SBA, like a government thing. If you don't know what 8A is, you're probably not that. Don't bother to select it.
If you don't know what it is, you're not certified.
Basically,
right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And long story short is it's not important. I think we're required to ask you that because we're funded in part by the SBA. So they require us to track that data, but based on my confusing answer, it's obviously not that important. If we don't even
Gabe
know.
also wanted to know, as far as surveying customers, is there an app or website you recommend for facilitating surveys?
Oh, good question. So I'll just throw 3 out there. I'm not saying one's better than the other, any of that, but I've heard of people using Qualtrics. I've heard of people using SurveyMonkey, and I've heard of people using Google Forms. I would just say, you know, explore a few different ones. Some of them, there's different paid options. Some of them, the free option gets you enough. I think I started on one of those once. I want to say SurveyMonkey, but don't quote me. And I'd spent all this time putting it together, and then I sent it out, and it only allowed me to collect up to 10 results without paying or something like that. And I don't know exactly which site. So I would just say, make sure before you choose a method that you know what you're getting. Frankly, Google Forms for me has been the best and easiest tool. You know, it allows you to compile the information anonymously. It emails you when you get results. You can have a fairly unlimited number of questions, and the questions can go, you can have them be multiple choice or short answer. And it's a Google platform thing, so most people are able to, it's fairly easy to use, whether you're on a Mac or a Microsoft or any, Mac or a PC or anything like that. So, so yeah, those three, Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms in the Google Drive are all options. I kind of prefer the Google Forms option.
Great. Well, if there's no other questions for today, I'll just put in a quick plug for our next library score program, which we've just gotten scheduled. So it's going to be May 1st. And the subject that day is going to be about buying and selling businesses. So, you know, if you're interested in acquiring a business or you're interested in selling your business, we're going to have 3 panelists who have experience in that arena to share their insights and sort of what they wish they knew before they had done that process. So that'll be May 1st, and we'll have the calendar listing up on the library's website soon. I'll include that when I send out the information from today as well, in case anyone's interested in attending that. Any last questions before we wrap up? Going once, going twice. Well, thank you all for being here. And as Alison said, you know, we're all the library score, SBDC, CEI, all these organizations are here to help you. So I'll send out a follow-up email with the resources from today, and don't hesitate to get in touch if we can be of any help.
Thanks for
everybody.
having me. Thanks everybody for coming.
Have a good day.